Okay, it's a 6 o'clock, so we're going to call our meeting to order. We are up and live, Michael. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, first order of business is to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the next area of business is approval of the agenda. So I look for a motion for that. It's Councillor Sanford and seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. We have the approval of the minutes for the July 11th regular council meeting. Look for a motion for the approval of the minutes. Councillor Ernst, Councillor Bertels. Any errors or omissions to note? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we comes to item 5, public input and questions. We have 2 people who have registered to speak tonight. First on the list is Jamie Meyer. Jamie, would you like to come forward?
Here we go. Hey, usually I don't need a mic, so I just want to thank you all for letting me speak tonight. I really want to say that I'm really impressed with this part of the agenda you added. I think that Councillor Sanford brought that up a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I think it's a great addition to the agenda. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I guess the only reason I'm really here tonight is I'm not here to argue or discuss anything that's on the agenda, except that there are 2 motions that are being presented tonight. On tonight's agenda. One is the Blockhouse Hill public presentations. For that one, I'm not even arguing whether it should proceed or not, because you guys have already, paid them to do the drawings. That I'm just basically asking if maybe the dates that are set in that could possibly be maybe deferred to set the dates until after a new mayor is elected on Saturday, because no matter, one of us 2 are going to win. It'd be nice to know for sure the new mayor could possibly attend those, depending on what dates they are. So just asking you to review that part of the motion and maybe set the dates after this weekend, considering it's only 4 days away. The second item on the agenda that I noticed was the request for proposals of $76,000 roughly for the Civic Square design. And again, I think that's a project it's quite a large project. It's going to be quite the expense moving forward. And to me, $76,000 plus tax is quite the expense. And again, not that a new mayor can make any difference in the decision, because I certainly know how the system works. But again, I'd like to see that item just deferred until after Saturday. I think at least some input from whoever wins on Saturday, or some discussion from whoever wins, would be greatly appreciated by either candidate. And again, I guess that's the only reason that I was asking to speak tonight, those 2 items. I'm not arguing whether there should be done or can be done or whatever. It's just if they could be deferred, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Jamie. Next on the list is Robert Young. Robert, would you like to come forward?
Yeah, Robert Young and Different Street in Lunenburg, and this will be the most boring presentation you're ever going to hear. This has to do with Blockhouse Hill. In their wisdom, we changed the name of Blockhouse Hill. I forgot the person's name it was. Pardon?
Sylvia.
Okay, anyways. We did it because of her brave attitude and helping us to fight off the Americans when they invaded here. And I think because she did so much, we should give her even greater advocacy. I think she should be nominated to become a member of the Order of Nova Scotia and also the Order of Canada. And I'd like to see you people start the paperwork to see that it's done. So I guess you would do it for the provincial government here, and and perhaps a federal member of parliament also. And that's all I have got to say.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, at this point, we have no other persons registered, so I just call out to the floor. If there's anyone else who would like to come forward. Doesn't look like it, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Oh yes, there is a public hearing. There is a presentation today. Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. We have David Murdoch and Lisa Bennett. I think we have them online, or where are they here? They're online. Okay, so we'll give the floor to them.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here today. My name is David Murdoch. I am the chair of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Partnership Society. This society is comprised of an interdisciplinary team of professionals and community members, and is responsible.
David, just pause for a moment. We're having an audio problem, so if you can just hang tight here, we'll see if we can fix it. It's part of the job I won't miss the most when it's when someone takes over here.
Well, yeah, no, I'm setting it off, but
David, do you want to try and see if we can get a level here for us?
Testing. Hello.
That's a little better. We're just going to do a little more fine tuning here. Just hang tight. Okay, David, proceed. See if we can get this worked up.
Does that sound all right to you?
It's very low, but we can hear you.
there.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's not-
Is that better? Anyway, I was talking about the society, and it's comprised of an interdisciplinary team of professionals and community members, and it's responsible to oversee the work of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. This program is made possible through funding from the 5 municipalities, the United Way, the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care, and various other grants. I'd like to recognize the value contribution made by the town of Lunenburg. We are here today to share what the Senior Safety Program is all about and provide an annual update. I'd now like to introduce our coordinator, Lisa Bennett, to tell you more about our work. Lisa?
Thank you, David. Thank you for allowing us to share some space with you and share what we've been up to. If I may, I'd like to share a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feedback. Having a little technical difficulty. Thank you for your patience. No, it's not allowing me to do it. Okay, let's try this. There we go. So Lunenburg County is a big county. So what have we been up to? I started with the coordinator back in October, and it's been a real pleasure getting to connect with everyone and reconnecting with others and working with our seniors, getting to know them and what their needs are. Big part of the program is what works well, and that is to continue to do with what works well, which is home visits, connecting older adults and their families with resources that make a difference in their lives, that make things easier, inform choices, and valuing their right to choose how they move forward with things. Looking at adapting to the changing needs in the community, the fires, the flooding. It's made some unique requests that haven't been in the past. So connecting them with the resources that for government funding, different housing pieces, different resources that can help them through these harder times. So help finding and identifying the gaps as well. System navigation and advocacy is a big part of what we do. Excuse me. It's not everyone understands how a system works. So at that advocacy piece, understanding how the system works and how to work through it on both sides helps with a better connection of services. But again, it's about empowering seniors with choice. And then we do that through presentations and workshops, trying to be proactive so that they understand what's out there, especially when it comes to things like fraud, elder abuse. So we've done quite a few presentations so far this year, 15 in all so far. We're looking at trying pop-ups this year, which is popping up into, say, like a bank lobby and talking about what's relevant scams are happening, or looking at how to manage your money better and connecting people with services. And by doing so, we've been able to look at best practices for handling money, best practices for handling all those phone scams that happen and the online scams. These connections have met down the road with seniors self-referring to the program for further services. So I find that it's been a big success. We've also presented at the Fisherman's Memorial Hospital. And through that, there were other referrals to the program. So some of these have already happened, but what's coming up? More pop-ups in pharmacies and banks. There's been some asks for some local pharmacies. HBC Studio has a Living Well Expo. We're looking at doing that one as well. We are very excited to say that we're going to have a Seniors Academy in October in the fall. That will be held at our health center, and that will be by registration only, so more to come on that. Another thing that's worked well is helping with the isolation of older adults through things like the Warm Line and Secret Santa. So there's lots on the table, lots more to come. We're also continuing with the Vial of Life program. It's been a huge success. The vial speaks for you in an emergency when you cannot. So having that information to first responders can be quite important, both for the first responders who have to make important calls. Who do they call? If there is a cell phone that they can look at, can they get into it? Is it locked? A lot of relatives are listed as, this is my uncle, this is my aunt, or this is my son or daughter. It's just named first names. So having the information within the vial has been very useful. And we've really, I'm amazed at how many we've been able to give out in just a short period of time, close to 500 so far. And we wouldn't be able to do it without the donation of the vials through the generous donation of vials of the different pharmacies, including Kinley's. I love their blue vials. They stand out and they're very pretty, but they're also very easy to see when you're opening the fridge door and looking for that vial of life. So we value their support. We're also revamping the Helping Tree. This is a resource list of local resources, broad range of charities, government agencies, things that might be of value to older adults within the community, depending on what their needs are. So it could be continuing care, VON, etc. It's a living entity. So we have another copy of it on our website, and we can, sorry, skipped ahead. Feel free to download that and share it. And also feel free to contact me if you notice any errors or any omits that you feel that should be added to it, and we're happy to do so. We're also working on a seniors mental wellness package, trying to put together a coping strategies and toolkit for seniors who have been isolated through COVID, but maybe they're going through a grieving crisis, how to connect if they're a caregiver, looking at some of those best practices to make their lives more manageable, more enjoyable, more mentally well. Mental health is often overlooked. So I'm very excited to be working on this, and it's a work in progress, but we hope to have it done maybe by the end of the year. Another thing we've worked on is home management navigating book. It's much like the Vial of Life, but it adds to it. It's more in depth, more detailed. It doesn't have to be a standalone for first responders. It can be a go-to resource for anyone who may be helping out and pitching in for, say you were going into the hospital and you needed someone to look after your home for a while, or maybe you are needing to keep your own checklists because you're starting to forget things. This has a lot of important resources and contact information on how your home lives or runs and how you live your life, and the important things that you would want someone to know in the event of them having to take on some of these pieces for you. So it's as individualized as each individual. Like the Vial of Life, there's a logo sticker that goes on the fridge door to let first responders know that it's there. But it's also, like I said, it can be a standalone for, not for an emergency piece, but for someone that's helping you out to run your home. And that's kind of what we're up to so far, which is quite a bit. We couldn't do what we do without your continued support, and we really appreciate everything that you do in supporting the program and helping us help our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. David, anything further you'd like to bring forward?
Well, I'm here in case there's, and Lisa, in case there are any questions from members of the council, yourself.
Any questions from council? Looks like you had a thorough presentation. I don't think we have any questions tonight, David, but thank you, and Lisa for your work and for being here tonight.
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you for your support. Thank you very much.
We
Good
appreciate
night.
it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. There's no business arising or unfinished business that I'm aware of. No correspondence, petitions, proclamations for consideration. So that moves us into new business. And the first item is 9-1, the Dares Lake Spillway. So I think that's in your wheelhouse, Tyson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation from staff is that council defer the Dares Lake Spillway project for capital year 23-24 with the intention of staff incorporating an eel passage into the design and revising this item within the water utilities 24-25 capital budget. We've also outlined a couple of alternatives. The first one's based off the tender. So council approves an increase for the Dares Lake Spillway project in the 23-24 water utility capital budget to the amount of $451,000 to allow the replacement of the spillway to be completed this year and the eel passage construction retrofit work to be added to a future year's water utilities capital budget with funding from the water utilities depreciation reserves. Part of that would be council awarding the Dares Lake Spillway project to Rick Jack Construction for the amount of $341,584.25 plus HST. The second alternative we have is that council defers the award of the Dares Lake Spillway project tender to allow staff more time to provide information relating to the implications of the eel passage on the construction of the spillway. So some background. The town's existing spillway out at Dares Lake has deteriorated over a number of years. The civil scope for the spillway project includes the following items. So the spline installation of a cast in place reinforced concrete structure in place of the existing spillway. The excavation and backfill of the section of the existing dam surrounding the spillway and along the existing dam. The supply and installation of pipe, valves, and a manhole to maintain the ecological maintenance flow, which is abbreviated to EMF. So that allows for the maintenance of the ecosystem within the channel that connects Dares Lake to Cantaloupe Lake, which is down below. And then the water control and erosion sediment control for the construction work. So in the 23-24 water utility capital budget for the spillway, small typo in the report, we had $200,000, including net HST. So that includes the consultants tendering and construction support during the construction of the spillway and the performance of the civil work by the contractor. So the design for this project commenced back in 2021 when the consultant and the town engaged with Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change and also Department of Fisheries and Oceans. In June of 2021, DFO sent the town and the consultant correspondence saying that no fish passage would be required for the spillway. Last season, the town was going through our renewal of our town's water withdrawal approval. This project was put on hold. We were hoping for clarification on the ecological maintenance flow would come through that process. So we postponed that till this year. And it wasn't until last week, which is a year after when we received that water withdrawal approval, that DFO actually provided any clarification on it. So when we got the water withdrawal approval last year and no details, we did include provision in the design as a future trying to play it safe. But DFO in their wisdom have come back last week, clarifying what they require. So in addition to that, in the review of the watercourse alteration permit, DFO has also flagged that they require an American eel passage to be incorporated into the spillway. So we received that information on July 13th. And it's based on a new interpretation of existing information that they had in 2021, but just a new understanding that DFO are applying. So ourselves and the consultant did meet with DFO and kind of showed them the history of the project and asked if there was any scope for it to be grandfathered in based on their previous instruction, but DFO doesn't allow grandfathering. So that was a short discussion, unfortunately. The other part of this work is that construction work in Nova Scotia watercourses is regulated by NSECC, and generally construction is limited to between June and the end of September. It is possible to apply for extensions to this into a little bit of October, but in my experience, rarely are these granted. So in terms of the discussion of the tender, the Dares Lake Spillway closed on July 11th, and the tender is valid for 90 days from that closing. So the tender results are summarized in the table, including the report. So we only had one tenderer. So that was Rick Jack. And this was prior to DFO's advice that the eel passage would be required. So that wasn't included in the tender. And if it's to proceed this year, would be an additional cost. So prior to receiving the direction relating to the eel passage, staff considered this project to be necessary for the ongoing performance and protection of the town's water system. If ever the spillway or dam were to fail, it would be very likely to impact the pump house, which feeds the raw water from Dares Lake to the water treatment plant. So we've discussed this with the consultant. They've advised us that there's a low, and in the letter that came after this report was written, they class it as a moderate risk of the existing dam not maintaining its performance until this time next year. I asked for some further clarification on that because low and moderate are kind of subjective, and their recommendation was based on the storm that we experienced on July 2021 and the performance of the dam in that event. They consider it a reasonable risk to take, postponing it a year. So again, yes, the consultant has provided their advice for moving forward, and that was in the attached letter that's in the agenda this evening. So the intention would be for the spillway to be redesigned by the consultant to include the new requirement for the eel passage and incorporate the EMF information that we've been given, which means changing it from a 6-inch pipe to an 8-inch pipe. It would be a minor change, but something that would need to be included. There are likely to be some additional costs to us associated with the rework, the redesign, retendering, another permit application to NSECC. An alternative would be to continue to push ahead and then try to retrofit the eel passage next year at a future date. However, there's several risks associated with proceeding this way. There's uncertainty about the details of the eel passage. DFO asked us to speak to Coastal Action, which is a group that works out of Mahone Bay. So I followed up with Coastal Action on what an eel passage requires. And by the sounds of it, they're working currently with Nova Scotia Power on one other instance where an eel passage is required. So it kind of feels like this American eel is a new focus of theirs, and there would be some uncertainty with it. The town has yet to receive permits or letters of advice from NSECC. We did receive the letter of advice from DFO since this report was written, but it includes the stipulations with the eel passage and a subsequent one with the EMF. And then the water utility would be exposed to some cost inefficiencies with the repeat work by performing this as two projects, such as the permits, contractors mobilizing to site twice, putting in the same water controls twice. There's a lot of duplication of work. Another option would be deferring decision on the tender until the additional information on the eel passage and its implications is available. But with next council meeting at the start of September, a 4 to 6 week construction schedule expected, that pushes us past the likely window for the permit past the end of September. So under the financial section, we've also provided a summary there. So again, to recap, the existing capital budget for the water utility has $200,000. The revised budget, if we were to proceed based on the tender that we received, has us up at $451,000. So a large increase of $251,000. If that funding was to be required, it would need to be sourced from the water utility depreciation funds. And then we'd likely be into another $100,000 ballpark cost for the eel passage next year as well. So staff feels there is a considerable financial risk proceeding at this point due to the uncertainty surrounding the eel passage. Previously, we'd considered this project a priority to be completed this capital year, just with the risk it presented to the spillway and the pump house. But with the new requirements and the consultant's advice, our recommendation is to defer the work to allow the redesign and for it to be completed next year to achieve as many financial efficiencies as possible.
Thank you, Tyson. Any questions for Tyson?
Thank you. Just beat you, Susan. Okay, so through the chair, we're looking at about $393,000 or so tax in on this Rich Act tender right now. In the report, it mentioned some possible savings by retendering because the consultant felt that by retendering, we may get a better deal this time around next year than what we had this year when there was an explosion of construction activity. Do you feel that's a fair assessment?
Through the chair, it's always better when you have more than one tenderer and have some competition involved. This isn't the ideal time for tendering because many companies sort of have a lot of work in front of them. And so, yeah, the intention would be to get the permitting process going much earlier to allow us to tender much earlier in the season and get that engagement from multiple contractors.
It sounds to me like this tender went through with the best intention, and then you were informed by the federal government that it has to change. Is that right? Okay. It doesn't, from what I'm seeing here, it doesn't look like make any sense to try and do that this year. We're going to miss permitting. It's going to be increased costs. We're going to be duplicating work. I see no reason not to move this till next year. I do have a question, I guess, throughout our CAO. Is this, when we're looking at this motion, are we approving this, pre-approving this for the budget for next year, or are we just moving this to next year's budget and it will be approved at the time of the budget with anything else?
Through the chair to Councillor Howson, that would be correct. So we'd be moving it off to next year. We get better efficiencies from costing as well as better information from DFO. Both Tyson and I are quite shocked with the 11th hour interpretation that they wouldn't move on. So I think it's in our best interest to reevaluate.
And I guess my second part of that question was, are we pre-approving that budget item with this motion, or will it come during budget time and we'll approve it at that time with the rest of the budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Howson, I would suggest the latter because with prices may change. So we'll bring it back to council for approval again.
Thank you.
Councilor Sanford?
Thank you. Through the chair, I do agree with the points that you're raising, Councillor Halverson. Just had a quick question for Tyson. You had mentioned about, there was a bit of a comparison with the July, I think you said 2021 in the context of rainfall amounts. And I was wondering, do we have anything more recent with the storm that we just had in July with the heavy rains? Or maybe it was July 2023. Maybe it was just an error in the date.
Through the chair, yeah, I may have miscommunicated there, but the storm that we had where we were flooded out was July 21st, 2023. And that was the storm I was referring to when I said July 21. So
Okay.
sorry if that wasn't
That's okay.
wasn't clear.
Thank you for the clarification. I was just wondering, you answered the question that I had with that comment. So thank you.
Yeah, we survived that one. I think it should hold up for a little while longer. No further questions. There is a motion on the floor. I look for a mover of that. Moved by Councillor Sanford, second by Councillor Bertels.
Sorry, could be clear on which motion we're,
Oh, the motion that's prepared here, it's that council defer the Dares Lake Spillway project for capital year 23-24 with the intention of staff incorporating an eel passage into the design and revising this item within the water utilities 24-25 capital budget. You're gonna second? Yeah, okay, good. Oh, no, we had Council Burles. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next item, 9.2, Blockhouse Hill Design Project Public Engagement. Arthur, you have something for us?
Thank you, Your Worship. For the public record, my name's Art Donald. I'm the Director of Community Development. The Blockhouse project includes a public engagement process. The RFP required at least 3 public engagements, a visioning report, and a what we heard report. McKay Lyons Sweet Apple Architects proposal included 4 public engagements, 3 public workshops, and a public meeting before council. Each workshop will open with a brief staff presentation outlining the process and introducing attendees to their consultants. At workshop 3, options, McKay Lyons Sweet Apple Architects will bring forward possible designs for Blockhouse for public input. McKay Lyons Sweet Apple Architects will then revise these possible designs based on community feedback into 4 possible development options and bring them before council on December 12th, 2023. Members of the public will also be able to present before council at the December 12th, 2023 meeting. So staff proposes an outline of 3 public workshops as well as a meeting before council as part of a council presentation. The first workshop is a visioning exercise intended to be held on September 14th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the fire hall station. Workshop number 2 is for an urban design project proposed to happen on October 19th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. again at the fire hall station. Workshop 3, outlining the options, is intended to be held on November 9th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. also at the fire hall station. And then the 4th meeting will be a council presentation on December 12th at 6 p.m. at the town hall. We have a proposed recommendation for council's consideration to approve the public participation schedule. However, there are alternatives to approve the public participation schedule with changes, as well as a further option to actually delay this decision to maybe our next council meeting if council so wishes to do. So that is our public report with regards to public engagement for the Blockhouse Hill project. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Is there any questions for Arthur? Councilor Sanford.
Through the chair, my question, I do have a question, but it's not for Arthur, but it is for Kayla, if it's acceptable. Kayla, when will the newly elected mayor be sworn in? What's the timeline for that, please?
So that would happen at the first council meeting following the election. So that would be, I believe, the September 12th is the date. So the mayor would be sworn in on that meeting.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just curious about the workshops. I see we've got visioning, then urban design, then options, and then the council meeting presentation. Presumably the at that council meeting, the presentation will, those are those three options that will be put forward. The agenda goes out, roughly about a week beforehand. I think given how important this topic is to the community, is it possible at each stage of these workshops to at least release a summary of what was said, what was learned, so that the public is informed, those who maybe couldn't make it there in person, so that they're duly informed and up to date on what's happening throughout the process?
I guess my question, oh, yeah, is there a what we've heard sort of summary, Arthur, for the workshops?
Through the chair, yes, there'll be a visioning report as well as a what we heard report being developed throughout the process. So through our website and through social media, we plan on updating the public with regards to feedback that we received through the public, through the workshop. We also envision an online questionnaire survey. And those results will be actually incorporated within those reports as well. So we really want to keep the public informed throughout the entire process.
Any further questions? I will, note Mr. Meyer's comments earlier, and I appreciate that. But again, like this is well in advance, and I think, either party should be able to, take the, clear calendar for something of this importance anyway. So, and, I do think that the mayor's office always has a little better line in, what's coming up anyway. So they'll be well informed about what's happening and what's coming forward for the meetings. So I don't think that would pose a problem. So we do have a motion on the floor. Do we have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next item is awarding the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project RFP. Guess that's you're up again, Arthur.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, for the public record, my name is Arthur McDonald, and I'm the Director of Community Development. We have a report in front of council this evening with regards to awarding the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project. The town issued a request for proposals for 3 design schemes for the Civic Square on June 7th with a submission deadline of July 12th. We received 2 submissions, one from ERA Architects and Vigilant Atlantic. Staff recommends that Vigilant Atlantic proposal as it is within the town's allocated budget. And after the HST rebate comes in at $79,330.36 net HST, and our budget is $80,000. Vigilant Atlantic included a topographical survey and scored higher with regards to their knowledge and background in heritage conservation and heritage-led developments. The project is driven by the need to make public places accessible by 2030, in keeping with the provincial initiative to have an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. The issuance of the RFP helps the town better understand the costs associated with the project. Consultants will provide a tender document with Class C estimates, cost estimates, which will help us apply to funding agencies and be shovel ready when council wishes to proceed. So we have proposed recommendations for council's consideration. Again, to award Vigilant Atlantics the $76,070 plus HST to fulfill their proposal submitted under the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project request for proposals. And there are alternatives for council's consideration. We could award a contract to a different applicant. We could decide not to award a contract and issue a new request for proposal. We could decide not to award the contract and not issue a new request for proposal for this project. And also we could delay council's decision. So that is my report for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Questions for Arthur? So Harrelson?
I guess what I'm wondering here, a lot of what this is based on is getting ready for the 2030 accessibility requirements that are coming down from the province, so that all the public spaces have to be accessible. So we're about 7 years out from that. I mean, I'm all for being ready, being shovel ready, because we know that when it comes to funding, when the province says we've got money, are you ready to go? If we say yes, we get the money. And if we don't, well, we may not. And then we still have to foot the bill. So I guess the question I have right now is, has anyone been in contact with anyone in the province? Is there any indication that funding is coming? Do we have any kind of timeline on that at all?
Through the chair to Council House, and top of my head, no, I haven't been, but we are very much aware of the accessibility requirement. And we've seen in a lot of cases, any grant applications that we do see and we apply for, we really need to have the background information with us to understand what the cost implications could be. So off the top of my head, perhaps staff may have a better line of sight into some of those grant applications, but I don't.
All right, no, oh, Lisa.
I was just going to say, I haven't been in touch with anybody of both them, but I know this is in anticipation that as we get closer to the deadline, there will be grants, I assume, and just lining us up to be ready for that opportunity.
Okay. And I just, it's the last question I have is about the plan itself that we're asking for. We're asking for the plan that we could go ahead with. So like this would be a firm final plan that, you know, once we approve this, and then when the funding comes down, we're ready to go. Boom, we can pull the trigger. There's really no reworking.
Through the chair, yes.
And I'll ask one other question just for clarification, because I had a resident ask me this today. The assumption was that this is just about the bandstand, but if we could be clear, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about the bandstand, making the paths, the entrances to this building, and the entrances to the park accessible for all residents by 2030. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through the chair to Councillor Halverson, yes, you would be correct, but perhaps staff can fill in any details.
Through the chair, yes, that is basically correct. It will be looking at, we already have an accessible entrance here into the town hall on the west side of the building. They'll be looking more at the front entrance and seeing if it's feasible to actually redesign that for accessibility as well. So it includes all the monuments, especially for, you know, Remembrance Day, as well as going up the hill and trying to make everything compatible in its design and use of materials.
Oh, Council Sanford.
Through the chair to Arthur, as I looked at this, I was mindful the emphasis is on accessibility, right? So I know when you're looking at the scoring and so on, there's more of a weight there put on the heritage piece than there is on the accessibility piece. So it's slight, but again, it just caused me to think and question to what extent will the folks that are awarded the contract consult with folks with disabilities to be able to get their input so that they are informed as to what the potential needs are specific for the town of Lunenburg and what we're trying to accomplish here. And it then also led me to think about another aspect that's stated is it gives us, as in council, a better understanding of what the actual costs are for this particular type of a project. But I think it goes beyond that. It gives us not only an idea of the costs associated with the project, but it helps us and the town overall as a whole to better understand what are the needs that we need to be focused on in the context of accessibility. And I would like a better understanding of the population as a whole in the town of Lunenburg. I think because we have an aging population here, I suspect our needs are higher in context maybe to the provincial needs. So it's a great opportunity here for not just understanding a financial piece and the commitment we need to make, but also to raise the level of awareness around accessibility and how we can work together to ensure that our town is accessible for residents. Thank you.
Through the chair, I agree 100% with all that you stated there. The town is very fortunate that we have Ellen as their joint accessibility coordinator, and we'll be working closely with her with regards to this project throughout.
Any further questions? We do have a draft motion on the floor. Is anyone willing to move that? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Any further discussion on the motion? I just have maybe just one question to through to finance. Is this something that, knowing that it's going to come down the pipe within the next 5-6 years, that we would start to accrue money to put towards this?
That certainly could be something that council considers once we have those numbers to work from. Yes.
Thank you. Obvious question, isn't it, Lisa? No further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next is the proposed alteration to the municipal heritage property, the Old Town School. And do we have a Hillary, you up for that one?
Good evening. For the record, I'm Hillary Grant, Senior Planner and Heritage Officer here with the town of Lunenburg. So before you this evening is an application to substantially alter Old Newtown School, a municipal heritage property at 17 Tannery Road. The municipal heritage designation applies to both the schoolhouse and the surrounding property. Under Section 17(1) of the Heritage Property Act, substantially altering a municipal heritage property requires council approval and the issuing of a heritage permit. The applicant wants to turn Old Newtown School into 4 residential units. This includes installing 2 windows and 1 exterior door for each unit on the gable ends of the building, adding 5 skylights on both the north and south sides of the roof for a total of 10 skylights, installing stairs and decks on the gable ends of the building, adding parking spaces, and re-shingling the roof. The Heritage Advisory Committee reviewed the application on July 10th and recommended approving the application if the stair design was modified to meet the Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District design guidelines. The applicant has since revised the stair design such that the images you see in your agenda package meet the design guidelines. One of Old Newtown School's character-defining elements is the green space surrounding the building. This application does include parking spaces for the new residents. The applicant has worked with staff to mitigate the impact of these parking spaces very diligently. Staff recommend council approve the proposal and direct staff to issue a heritage permit for this project. Council may, of course, refuse to issue a heritage permit or stipulate staff issue a permit with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Any questions for Hillary? A thorough report. Okay, so I'd ask for someone to move the motion that's presented. Counselor Bertels and Counselor Ernst seconds. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And last item here is the Housing Accelerator Fund application. Who has that one? Hillary?
Good evening. I appreciate your continued patience as I present the last new business item on tonight's agenda, the town's potential application to the Housing Accelerator Fund. Again, for the record, I'm Hillary Grant, Senior Planner and Heritage Officer. On May 17th, the federal government announced a $4 billion fund to support the creation of new housing across the country. This funding is to address Canada's housing crisis, both the lack of housing and the unaffordability of housing. Staff have prepared an over $3 million application to the Housing Accelerator Fund and are seeking Council's direction to apply for the program. The Housing Accelerator Fund is structured differently than many municipal funding programs. Normally, when applying for funding, you propose a project, you outline how much it will cost, and then evaluators decide whether or not to fund the project. Funding is for that project and that project only. The Housing Accelerator Fund instead is offering $20,000 for each unit the town anticipates will be created in 3 years if we receive funding to implement 5 housing initiatives. These housing initiatives need to be systematic changes that create an environment more conducive to housing growth and affordability, not one-off projects. Any funding left over after implementing the housing initiatives can be spent on a wide range of municipal expenses at Council's discretion, including infrastructure extensions and upgrades. It's also important to note that new housing units can mean many different things. It doesn't just mean building new homes, though of course that can be part of the town's new unit count. It can also mean, for example, adding in-law suites into existing homes or small accessory dwellings into backyards, innovative new types of housing that might be considered low design impact housing diversification. New housing units can include housing the town itself builds, but also units built through public-private partnerships or entirely privately. What matters is whether there are more places for people to live within the municipality at the end of 3 years, not the type of housing or how it gets built. However, you do receive more money if the housing units that are created are accessible, affordable, or both. Funds will be dispersed in 4 equal payments over a 3-year period. We receive the first 3 payments, 75% of the total funding, if we implement our housing initiatives, regardless of whether they result in any new residential units. The last payment, the last 25% of funding, we only receive if we hit our housing target. To mitigate any financial risk to the town, our initiatives cost much less than $2.25 million, so much less than the 75% of money we're applying for. Even if we don't meet our housing targets and don't receive the last 25% of funding, we will still have a surplus of grant money to spend on community projects that support housing, like infrastructure. Money has already been allocated towards many of these initiatives under the municipal budget, and we have confirmed with the program organizers that we can apply for funding for already budgeted items. We are proposing 6 housing initiatives to increase the competitiveness of our application. These are, first, an additional accessible unit incentive, reimbursing municipal service hookup and subdivision fees when a project has accessible housing above building code requirements. Second, an affordable housing grant program, offering direct financial assistance to promote new affordable housing projects in Lunenburg. Third, promoting infill in Old Town Lunenburg through the new Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw clearer design expectations, and streamlined processes. Next, integrating the housing targets from our comprehensive community plan into our asset management plan and creating a sustainable infrastructure grant program towards smart, sustainable infrastructure investments that support housing growth and protect municipal services to existing homes. Fifthly, granting a 3-year municipal tax break towards increasing affordable and accessible housing. This would only apply to new, affordable, and accessible housing, so wouldn't decrease the town's tax revenue. The hope is that it will incentivize new home construction in our community, increasing tax revenue in the long run, basically deferring gains towards higher future income. And lastly, exploring town-owned land divestiture and agreements for housing, including creating comprehensive development districts that outline the terms and conditions for developers to comply with affordable housing and other design requirements when developing formerly town-owned residential lands. If the town is successful and receives funding, council will still vote on each of these initiatives and programs, and the public can speak before council. These initiatives are still very high level. If we receive funding, staff will need to work out details and seek public and council input. Again, staff is seeking council support to apply for funding under the Housing Accelerator Fund. Council can recommend the town not apply for funding or direct staff to apply with additional instructions, such as changing the proposed housing initiatives.
Thank you, Hillary. Questions for Hillary? Councilor Halverson.
Thanks for the presentation, Hillary. I would just want to say, I mean, I have a ton of questions about these proposed initiatives, but again, thank you for mentioning that those are high level, and we'll get to those later. And I appreciate we'll be getting some input on them. I just have a hard time turning down free money, so I can't see why we wouldn't go for this.
Any further questions, Hillary? One question I have, Hillary, is like, what's the timeline? When would we expect to see the money come into our hands?
Through the chair, the program coordinators have told us that they're hoping to evaluate all applications this September and hopefully start dispersing funds as early as October.
Maybe could you give some examples of, you mentioned that we already have based on our land use bylaws, municipal planning strategies. What are some of the examples of those that are enabling us to apply for this grant?
Through the chair, upon preparing this application, it became very evident to staff that the town of Lunenburg is in many ways ahead in its planning towards increasing housing and housing affordability here in the town of Lunenburg. For example, allowing accessory dwellings, allowing in-law suites, removing many hurdles that developers would have to jump through in terms of permitting, allowing as-of-right development. All of these things are eligible systematic changes under the program. We, of course, have already completed those, and thus we cannot apply or suggest that we are going to do them as initiatives. They're already completed. Other initiatives that other municipalities are considering, such as Halifax, are things such as implementing new e-permitting systems to help reduce the time that it takes for developers to receive permits. Here in the town of Lunenburg, our permitting process is actually remarkably quick in comparison to other municipalities if you do a comprehensive audit. And we were informed by the funder that it is unlikely that something like that would make for a competitive application within our context. New housing studies produced by the CMHC were consulted in proposing these initiatives to make sure that we're proposing things that should make the most impact within the town of Lunenburg.
So our comprehensive community plan has put us ahead of the curve. Very good. Okay, we do have a motion there on the floor to direct staff to pursue this funding. Council Halverson, Council Sanford. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, that concludes our new business. We have a new item on the agenda. That's like a notice of motion. This is an opportunity for councilors to bring something forward for discussion for our next meeting. Is there anything there that council has? Councilor Halverson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think we're all aware of the fiscal report that was just issued by the Lunenburg Academy Foundation. They put it on their website. It got, I thought it was a good report, very thorough. It got me to thinking though about the accounting of this. And I really do feel like regardless to if ends up that the town retains ownership, if the Academy Foundation ends up running it, those costs should be transparent to each and every resident. So I'm looking for a couple of things here. Basically, I have an eye on, I think at some point, what we should look at is an area rate so that it's broken out from our property taxes. So it's a line item. So when we get our property tax bill, we all understand every year how much is going to support the academy, especially if it's being run by, an entity that as benevolent as they are outside the town. So what I'm looking for is, I guess I look to staff to this, a reasonable time frame that we could get a full accounting of costs for the academy. I mean, I'm looking at, I think if we're looking at the long term, we're going to have to look at not just the operational costs, but do we need to put reserves away for possible capital expenses, and just so we're not left unawares. So I guess I look to staff to find out what would be a timeline and an appropriate course of an appropriate scope for that project.
Through the chair to Councilor Halverson, I agree with you. I think it's certainly something we can do. Before I suggest a date when we could bring that back, I want to have a chat with Lisa, or at least run it by Lisa before she shoots me in the hallway. But I know they're coming to a year-end audit, so perhaps Lisa, if you could provide us, I was thinking probably the last meeting in September might be a bit beneficial for us to do that. But again, I'll ask Lisa's advice from their capacity.
The end of September might be a bit of a challenge just because we're trying to get the year-end audit completed for that date. I was going to suggest October, as early as possible in October, is something that we could consider for that.
Okay, well, I guess however we frame that motion, I'd like to see that accounting come forward at the appropriate time, as early as convenient in October.
Well, I think actually like the purpose of this portion is that motion would come forward at the next meeting. So that the staff has an opportunity to craft the motion for us rather than put it on the fly. I mean, it was something that we wanted to do on the fly. It's there, but I think that would be probably more appropriate at this time. And that way Jamie and Lisa can have the discussion on a timeline, what it might look like. And then we will have it, see that in our account, in our packages, and be able to make a little more of an informed decision when it comes forward. Does that sound reasonable?
Through the chair, the deputy mayor, yeah, that would be reasonable for us.
Okay, again, this is a new item here, so we're figuring it out, and that sounds good to me.
Yeah,
So,
we got new road. So yeah, we're trying to navigate it. So good. Anything further from anyone else that would like to bring forward for another item on the agenda? Very good. Then the next item is our in camera. So I guess we business is concluded for our regular meeting for time being, and we'll move in camera. So I look for a motion to move in camera. Moved by Council Sanford, moved by Council Ernst. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried, and we'll take a 10-minute recess.
There we go.
Okay, so we have one item to rise and report on from the in-camera meeting. We have a motion here that council directs staff to return to the September 12th, 2023 regular council meeting with a report on the possible divestiture of Upper Hall Street, known as PID 607264 840 to accommodate the possible relocation of Harborview Haven. So I look for a mover of that. Moved by Councilor Ernst, seconded by Councilor Sanford. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And no further business. I declare the meeting adjourned.
You're taking back.